Hi everyone. So we're continuing today after some pause we had a few visitors here. So we had lots of Harinam last week, and now we're back into reading. So we are continuing. We are starting first verse in chapter 25, still in Canto 3. And so we do the invocation prayers now. Sarva Shastrabhi Piyusha, Sarva Vedaika Satphala, Sarva Siddhanta Ratnadya, Sarva Lokaika Drikpradam, Sarva Bhagavata Prana, Srimad Bhagavata Prabhu, Kalidvanto Ditaditya, Shri Krishna Parivartita, Paramananda Patnaya, Prema Vakshaksharayate, Sarvanda Sarva Sivyaya, Shri Krishna Namostume. Madhika Bandho Matsangin Madguru Madmahadana Manishtaraka Madbhagya Madananda Namostute Asadu Sadutadayin Hati Nicho Chataraka Hanamuncha Kadachin Mam Premna Hrit Kantayospura. In translation, O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all of the worlds. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali, you are the exact image of Shri Krishna. I bow down to you who are supremely blissful to read, your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone, you are Shri Krishna himself. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, and my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, Hare Krishna again. So today's reading starts at verse number 1, chapter 25, The Glories of Devotional Service, Canto 3. So translation. Sri Shonaka said, although he is unborn, the Supreme Personality of Godhead took birth as Kapila Muni by his internal potency. He descended to disseminate transcendental knowledge for the benefit of the whole human race. Purport. The word Atma Pragnaptaye indicates that the Lord descends for the benefit of the human race to give transcendental knowledge. Material necessities are quite sufficiently provided for in the Vedic knowledge, which offers a program for good living conditions and gradual elevation to the platform of goodness. In a mode of goodness, one's knowledge expands. On the platform of passion, there is no knowledge, for passion is simply an impetus to enjoy material benefits. On the platform of ignorance, there is no knowledge and no enjoyment, but simply life amongst like that of animals. The Vedas are meant to elevate one from the mode of ignorance to the platform of goodness. When one is situated in a mode of goodness, he is able to understand knowledge of the self or transcendental knowledge. This knowledge cannot be appreciated by any ordinary man. Therefore, since a disciplic succession is required, this knowledge is expounded either by the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself or by his bona fide devotee. Shonaka Rishi also states here that Kapila, the incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, took birth or appeared simply to appreciate and disseminate transcendental knowledge. Simply to understand that one is not matter but spirit soul, aham brahmasmi, I'm by nature Brahman, is not sufficient knowledge for understanding the self and his activities. One must be situated in the activities of Brahman. Knowledge of those activities is explained by the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. Such transcendental knowledge can be appreciated in human society but not in animal society, as clearly indicated here by the word nrinam for the human beings. Human beings are meant for regulated life. By nature, there is regulation in animal life also, but it is not like the regulative life as described in the scriptures or by the authorities. Human life is regulated life, not animal life. In regulated life only can one understand transcendental knowledge. Verse 2. Shonaka continued, there is no one who knows more than the Lord himself. No one is more worshipable or more mature a yogi than he. He is therefore the master of the Vedas, and to hear about him always is the actual pleasure of the senses. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita it is stated that no one can be equal to or greater than the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is confirmed in the Vedas also. Eko bahunam yo vidadhati khaman. He is the Supreme Living Entity and is supplying the necessities of all other living entities. Thus all other living entities, both Vishnu Tattva and Jiva Tattva, are subordinate to the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna. The same concept is confirmed here. Nyahyasya varshmana pumsaha. Amongst the living entities, no one can surpass the Supreme Person because no one is richer, more famous, stronger, more beautiful, wiser, or more renounced than he. These qualifications make him the Supreme Godhead, the cause of all causes. Yogis are very proud of performing wonderful feats, but no one can compare to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Anyone who is associated with the Supreme Lord is accepted as the first-class yogi. Devotees may be as powerful as the Supreme Lord, but by constant association with the Lord they become as good as the Lord himself. Sometimes the devotees act more powerfully than the Lord. Of course, that is the Lord's concession. Also used here is the word Varim Naha, meaning the most worshipful of all yogis. To hear from Krishna is the real pleasure of the senses. Therefore he is known as Govinda, for by his words, by his teachings, by his instruction, by everything connected with him, he enlivens the senses. Whatever he instructs is from the transcendental platform, and his instructions, being absolute, are non-different from him. Hearing from Krishna or his expansion or plenary expansion like Kapila is very pleasing to the senses. Bhagavad Gita can be read or heard many times, but because it gives great pleasure, the more one reads Bhagavad Gita, the more he gets the appetite to read and understand it, and each time he gets new enlightenment. That is the nature of the transcendental message. Similarly, we find that transcendental happiness in the Srimad Bhagavatam. The more we hear and chant the glories of the Lord, the more we become happy. Very simple formula. Chant and hear. Like Madan Rani was saying also in the classes the last 2 days. The Samam Bonam. It's actually really simple, but so difficult at the same time. For many, I mean, including me. So verse 3. Therefore, please precisely describe all the activities and pastimes of the personality of Godhead, who is full of self-desire and who assumes all these activities by his internal potency. Tani Atma Maya. Yeah. Purport. The word Anukirtaya is very significant. Anukirtaya means to follow the description, not to create a concocted mental description, but to follow. Shonaka Rishi requested Sutta Goswami to describe what he had actually heard from his spiritual master, Shukadeva Goswami, about the transcendental pastimes the Lord manifested by his internal energy. Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, has no material body, but he can assume any kind of body by his supreme will. That is made possible by his internal energy. Atma Maya. Text 4. Sutta Uvacha. Sri Sutta Goswami said, the most powerful sage Maitreya was a friend of Vyasadeva. Being encouraged and pleased by Vidura's inquiry about transcendental knowledge, Maitreya spoke as follows. Purport. Questions and answers are very satisfactorily dealt with when the inquirer is bona fide and the speaker is also authorized. Here Maitreya is considered a powerful sage, and therefore he is also described as Bhagavan. This word can be used not only for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but for anyone who is almost as powerful as the Supreme Lord. Maitreya is addressed as Bhagavan because he was spiritually far advanced. He was a personal friend of Dvaipayana Vyasadeva, a literary incarnation of the Lord. Maitreya was very pleased with the inquiries of Vidura because they were the inquiries of a bona fide advanced devotee. Thus Maitreya was encouraged to answer. When there are discourses on transcendental topics between devotees of equal mentality, the questions and answers are very fruitful and encouraging. So text 5. Maitreya said, when Kardama left for forest, Lord Kapila stayed on the strand of the Bindu Sarovara to please his mother, Devahuti. Purport. In the absence of the father, it is the duty of the grown son to take charge of his mother and serve her to the best of his ability, so that she will not feel separation from her husband. And it is the duty of the husband to leave home as soon as there is a grown son to take charge of his wife and family affairs. That is the Vedic system of household life. One should not remain continually implicated in household affairs up to the time of death. He must leave. Family affairs and the wife may be taken charge of by a grown son. Text 6. When Kapila, who could show her the ultimate goal of the absolute truth, was sitting leisurely before her, Devahuti remembered the words Brahma had spoken to her, and she therefore began to question Kapila as follows. Devahuti Ruvacha. Devahuti said, I am very sick of the disturbance caused by my material senses, for because of this sense disturbance, my Lord, I have fallen into the abyss of ignorance. Andatamaha, that's abyss of ignorance. Purport. Here the word Asat Indriya Tarshanat is significant. Asat means impermanent or temporary, and Indriya means senses. Thus Asat Indriya Tarshanat means from being agitated by the temporarily manifest senses of the material body. We are evolving through different statuses of material bodily existence, sometimes in a human body, sometimes in an animal body, and therefore the engagements of our material senses are also changing. Anything which changes is called temporary or asat. We should know that beyond these temporary senses are our permanent senses, which are now covered by the material body. The permanent senses, being contaminated by matter, are not acting properly. Devotional service, therefore, involves freeing the senses from this contamination. When the contamination is completely removed and the senses act in the purity of unalloyed Krishna consciousness, we have reached Sat Indriya, or eternal sensory activities. Eternal sensory activities are called devotional service, whereas temporary sensory activities are called sense gratification. Unless one becomes tired of material sense gratification, there is no opportunity to hear transcendental messages from a person like Kapila. Devahuti expressed that she was tired. Now that her husband had left home, she wanted to get relief by hearing the instructions of Lord Kapila. Text 8. Your Lordship, now Devahuti speaks, Your Lordship is my only means of getting out of this darkest region of ignorance, because you are the mental eye, which by your mercy only I have attained after many, many births. Purport. This verse is very instructive, since it indicates the relationship between the spiritual master and a disciple. The disciple or conditioned soul is put into this darkest region of ignorance and therefore is entangled in the material existence of sense gratification. It is very difficult to get out of this entanglement and attain freedom, but if one is fortunate enough to get the association of a spiritual master like Kapila Muni or his representative, then by his grace one can be delivered from the mire of ignorance. The spiritual master is therefore worshipped as one who delivers the disciple from the mire of ignorance with the light of the torch of knowledge. The word paragam is very significant. Paragam refers to one who can take the disciple to the other side. This side is conditioned life. The other side is the life of freedom. The spiritual master takes the disciple to the other side by opening his eyes with knowledge. We are suffering simply because of ignorance. By the instruction of the spiritual master, the darkness of ignorance is removed, and thus the disciple is enabled to go to the side of freedom. It is stated in Bhagavad Gita that after many, many births, one surrenders to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Similarly, if after many, many births one is able to find a bona fide spiritual master and surrender to such a bona fide representative of Krishna, one can be taken to the side of light. Remember that Madan Narayani was chanting the verse invocation at the beginning. Mukam karotim vachalam pangum langaite girim. So that's like my spiritual master. What's the translation? Open my eyes of ignorance with the torchlight of knowledge. Could be, but could be that one as well. Yeah, I think you're right. Om Agnana Timirandasya Dhyana Gnana Shalaka Chakshuru Miltamina Tasma Shri Gurave Namaha. Okay. 1 point, Sirumi. 1 point, Sirumi. No, 20 points, sorry. 20. Text 9. You are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the origin and Supreme Lord of all living entities. You have arisen to disseminate the rays of the sun in order to dissipate the darkness of the ignorance of the universe. Purport: Kapila Muni is accepted as an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Here the word Adyaha means the origin of all living entities, and Pumsa Ishvara means the Lord, Ishvara of the living entities. Ishvara Parama Krishna. That's from Brahma Samhita. Kapila Muni is the direct expansion of Krishna, who is the sun of spiritual knowledge. As the sun dissipates the darkness of the universe, so when the light of the Supreme Personality of Godhead comes down, it at once dissipates the darkness of Maya. We have our eyes, but without the light of the sun, our eyes are of no value. Similarly, without the light of the Supreme Lord, or without the divine grace of the spiritual master, one cannot see things as they are. One cannot see things as they are, but then sees things, thinking that usually knowing what the person is seeing. Everyone probably thinks, I know what I see. I know. It includes me, so text 10. Now be pleased, my Lord, to dispel my great delusion. Due to my feeling of false ego, I have been engaged by your Maya and have identified myself with the body and consequent bodily relations. Purport: the false ego of identifying one's body as oneself and of claiming things possessed in relationship with this body is called Maya. In Bhagavad Gita 15th chapter, the Lord says, I am sitting in everyone's heart, and from me come everyone's remembrance and forgetfulness. Devahuti has stated that false identification of the body with the self and attachment for possessions in relation to the body are also under the direction of the Lord. Does this mean that the Lord discriminates by engaging one in his devotional service and another in sense gratification? If that were true, it would be an incongruity on the part of the Supreme Lord, but that is not the actual fact. As soon as the living entity forgets his real constitutional position of eternal servitorship to the Lord and wants instead to enjoy himself by sense gratification, he is captured by Maya. This capture by Maya is the consciousness of false identification with the body and attachment for the possessions of the body. These are the activities of Maya, and since Maya is also an agent of the Lord, it is indirectly the action of the Lord. The Lord is merciful. If anyone wants to forget Him and enjoys this material world, He gives him full facility, not directly but through the agency of his material potency. Therefore, since the material potency is the Lord's energy, indirectly it is the Lord who gives the facility to forget Him. Devahuti therefore said, "My engagement in sense gratification was also due to you. Now kindly get me free from this entanglement." By the grace of the Lord, one is allowed to enjoy this material world. But when one is disgusted with material enjoyment and is frustrated, and when one sincerely surrenders unto the lotus feet of the Lord, then the Lord is so kind that He frees one from entanglement. Krishna says, therefore, in Bhagavad Gita, "First of all, surrender, and then I will take charge of you and free you from all reactions of sinful activities." Sinful activities are those activities performed in forgetfulness of our relationship with the Lord. In this material world, activities for material enjoyment, which are considered to be pious, are also sinful. For example, one sometimes gives something in charity to a needy person with a view to getting back the money 4 times increased. Giving with the purpose of gaining something is called charity in the mode of passion. Everything done here is done in the modes of material nature, and therefore all activities but service to the Lord are sinful. Because of sinful activities, we become attracted by the illusion of material attachment, and we think, "I am this body. I think of the body as myself and of bodily possessions as mine." Devahuti requested Lord Kapila to free her from that entanglement of false identification and false possession. Okay, text 11. Devahuti continued, "I have taken shelter of your lotus feet because you are the only person of whom to take shelter. You are the axe which can cut the tree of material existence. I therefore offer my obeisances unto you, who are the greatest of all transcendentalists, and I inquire from you as to the relationship between man and woman and between spirit and matter." Purport. Sankhya philosophy, as is well known, deals with Prakriti and Purusha. Purusha is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or anyone who imitates the Supreme Personality of Godhead as an enjoyer, and Prakriti means nature. That's interesting here. Prabhupada says that Purusha is also anyone who imitates. So that's all of us, right? I mean, maybe not all of us. I can't say you or them who just left. In some way, we try to imitate. So Prakriti means nature. In this material world, the material nature is being exploited by the Purushas, or the living entities. The intricacies in the material world of the relationship of the Prakriti and Purusha, or the enjoyed and the enjoyer, is called samsara, or material entanglement. Devahuti wanted to cut the tree of material entanglement, and she found a suitable weapon in Kapila Muni. The tree of material existence is explained in the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita as an ashrata tree, whose root is upwards and whose branches are downwards. It is recommended that one has to cut the root of this material existence tree with the axe of detachment. What is the attachment? The attachment involves Prakriti and Purusha. The living entities are trying to lord it over material nature. Since the conditioned soul takes material nature to be the object of his enjoyment, and he takes the position of the enjoyer, he is therefore called Purusha. Devahuti questioned Kapila Muni, for she knew that only he could cut her attachment to this material world. The living entities, in the guises of men and women, are trying to enjoy the material energy. Therefore, in one sense, everyone is Purusha, because Purusha means enjoyer, and Prakriti means enjoyed. In this material world, both the so-called man and so-called woman are imitating the real Purusha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is actually the enjoyer in the transcendental sense, whereas all others are Prakriti. The living entities are considered Prakriti. In Bhagavad Gita, matter is analyzed as apara, or inferior nature, whereas beyond this inferior nature there is another superior nature, the living entities. Living entities are also Prakriti, or enjoyed, but under the spell of Maya, the living entities are falsely trying to take the position of enjoyers. That is the cause of samsara bandha, or conditional life. Devahuti wanted to get out of a conditional life and place herself in full surrender. The Lord is Sharanya, which means the only worthy personality to whom one can fully surrender. It's a nice word, huh? Sharanya. It's like Naima Sharanya, but it's one part of the word. So now we know, or now I know what Sharanya means. Sharanya. Maybe it's a good word for something, for like a shop. Sharanya. Would you like to go to Sharanya? Yeah, it sounds good. Sorry. The Lord is Sharanya, which means the only worthy personality to whom one can fully surrender, because he is full of all opulences. If anyone actually wants relief, the best course is to surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord is also described here as Sat Dharma Vidam Varishtam. This indicates that of all transcendental occupations, the best occupation is eternal loving service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Dharma is sometimes translated as religion, but that is not exactly the meaning. Dharma actually means that which one cannot give up, that which is inseparable from oneself. The warmth of fire is inseparable from fire. Therefore, warmth is called the dharma or nature of fire. Similarly, Saddharma means eternal occupation. That eternal occupation is engagement in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. The purpose of Kapila Dev's Sankhya philosophy is to propagate pure, uncontaminated devotional service, and therefore he is addressed here as the most important personality amongst those who know the transcendental occupation of the living entity. Text 12. Maitreya Vacha. Maitreya said, after hearing of his mother's uncontaminated desire for transcendental realization, the Lord thanked her within himself for her questions, and thus, his face smiling, he explained the path of the transcendentalists who were interested in self-realization. Purport. Devahuti has surrendered her confession of material entanglement and her desire to gain release. Her questions to Lord Kapila are very interesting for persons who are actually trying to get liberation from material entanglement and attain the perfectional stage of human life. Unless one is interested in understanding his spiritual life or his constitutional position, and unless he also feels inconvenience in material existence, his human form of life is spoiled. One who does not care for these transcendental necessities of life and simply engages like an animal in eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating has spoiled his life. Lord Kapila was very much satisfied by his mother's questions because the answers stimulate one's desire for liberation from the conditional life of material existence. Such questions are called Apavarga Vardhanam. Those who have actual spiritual interest are called Sat, or devotees. Satam Prasangat. Sat means that which eternally exists, and Asat means that which is not eternal. Unless one is situated on the spiritual platform, he is not Sat, he is Asat. The asat stands on a platform which will not exist, but anyone who stands on the spiritual platform will exist eternally. As spirit soul, everyone exists eternally, but the asat has accepted the material world as his shelter, and therefore he is full of anxiety. Asat grahan, the incompatible situation of the spirit soul who has the false idea of enjoying matter, is the cause of the soul's being asat. Actually, the spirit soul is not asat. As soon as one is conscious of this fact and takes to Krishna consciousness, he becomes sat. Satam Gati, the path of the eternal, is very interesting to persons who are after liberation, and his lordship Kapila began to speak about the path, that path. Shri Bhagavan Vacha, the personality of Godhead, answered, the yoga system which relates to the Lord and the individual soul, which is meant for the ultimate benefit of the living entity, and which causes detachment from all happiness and distress in the material world, is the highest yoga system. Purport. In the material world, everyone is trying to get some material happiness. But as soon as we get some material happiness, there is also material distress. In the material world, one cannot have unadulterated happiness. Any kind of happiness one has is contaminated by distress also. For example, if we want to drink milk, then we have to bother to maintain a cow and keep her fit to supply milk. Drinking milk is very nice. It is also pleasure. But for the sake of drinking milk, one has to accept so much trouble. The yoga system, as here stated by the Lord, is meant to end all material happiness and material distress. Or maybe the example of, it's extreme example of, those who go drinking, they get happiness, but they get distress by hangover distress, or they get in a fight, or they lose money, or so many things happen to drunkards. So that's maybe more extreme example, or maybe more applicable here in modern age, because not many are keeping the cow. The yoga system, as here stated by the Lord, is meant to end all material happiness and material distress. And the best yoga, as taught in Bhagavad Gita by Krishna, is Bhakti Yoga. It is also mentioned in the Gita that one should try to be tolerant and not be disturbed by material happiness or distress. Of course, one may say that he is not disturbed by material happiness, but he does not know that just after one enjoys so-called material happiness, material distress will follow. This is the law of the material world. Lord Kapila states that the yoga system is the science of the spirit. One practices yoga in order to attain perfection on the spiritual platform. There is no question of material happiness or distress. It is transcendental. Lord Kapila will eventually explain how it is transcendental, but the preliminary introduction is given here. Or sometimes they say, the higher you fly, the lower you fall. Right? The higher you fly, the lower you fall. Yeah, about material happiness and distress. Yeah. Maybe I said it in a different way. Hmm? What's the more exact? Sorry?
This is something like the higher you fly, the more you're going to get hurt when you fall, or something like that.
Yeah, meaning like the more in material enjoyment you go, the more you'll get the opposite reaction. The opposite. So it will be you will have the opposite side would be. So don't get too into that material enjoyment or material happiness, which is gotten by the pleasing the senses, like into extreme. Then that other extreme also comes, or the other pole. Yeah, so the other pole of the. So it's always good to keep that as minimum as possible, or nullified. So we are 14 verse, sorry. So still Lord Kapiladev speaking, giving instruction. O most pious mother, I shall now explain unto you the ancient yoga system, which I explained formerly to the great sages. It is serviceable and practical in every way. Purport. The Lord does not manufacture a new system of yoga. Sometimes it is claimed that someone has become an incarnation of God and is expounding a new theological aspect of the absolute truth. But here we find that although Kapila Muni is the Lord himself and is capable of manufacturing a new doctrine for his mother, he nevertheless says, I shall just explain the ancient system which I once explained to the great sages, because they were also anxious to hear about it. When we have a super excellent process already present in Vedic scriptures, there is no need to concoct a new system to mislead the innocent public. At present, it has become a fashion to reject the standard system and present something bogus in the name of a newly invented process of yoga. Text 15. The stage in which the consciousness of the living entity is attracted by the three modes of material nature is called conditional life. But when that same consciousness is attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one is situated in the consciousness of liberation. Purport. There is a distinction here between Krishna consciousness and Maya consciousness. Guneshu, or Maya consciousness, involves attachment to the three material modes of nature, under which one works sometimes in goodness and knowledge, sometimes in passion, and sometimes in ignorance. These different qualitative activities, with the central attachment for material enjoyment, are the cause of one's conditional life. When the same Chetaha, or consciousness, is transferred to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, or when one becomes Krishna conscious, he is on the path of liberation. Text 16. When one is completely cleansed of the impurities of lust and greed produced from the false identification of the body as I and bodily possessions as mine, one's mind becomes purified. In that pure state, he transcends the stage of so-called material happiness and distress. Purport. Kama and Lobha are the symptoms of material existence. Everyone always desires to possess something. It is said here that desire and greed are the products of false identification of oneself with the body. When one becomes free from this contamination, then his mind and consciousness also become freed and attain their original state. Mind, consciousness, and the living entity exist. Whenever we speak of the living entity, this includes the mind and consciousness. The difference between conditional life and liberated life occurs when we purify the mind and the consciousness. When they are purified, one becomes transcendental to material happiness and distress. In the beginning, Lord Kapila has said that perfect yoga enables one to transcend the platform of material distress and happiness. How this can be done is explained here. One has to purify his mind and consciousness. This can be done by the Bhakti Yoga system. As explained in Narada Pancharatra, one's mind and senses should be purified. Tat paratvena nirmalam. One's senses must be engaged in devotional service to the Lord. That is the process. The mind must have some engagement. One cannot make the mind vacant. Of course, there are some foolish attempts to try to make the mind vacant or void, but that is not possible. The only process that will purify the mind is to engage it in Krishna. The mind must be engaged. If we engage our mind in Krishna, naturally the consciousness becomes fully purified, and there is no chance of the entrance of material desire and greed. Text 17. At that time, the soul can see himself to be transcendental to material existence and always self-effulgent, never fragmented, although very minute in size. Purport. In the state of pure consciousness or Krishna consciousness, one can see himself as a minute particle, non-different from the Supreme Lord. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, the jiva, or the individual soul, is eternally part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. Just as the sun's rays are minute particles of the brilliant constitution of the sun, so living entity is a minute particle of the Supreme Spirit. The individual soul and the Supreme Lord are not separated as in material differentiation. The individual soul is a particle from the very beginning. One should not think that because the individual soul is a particle, it is fragmented from the whole spirit. Mayavada philosophy enunciates that the whole spirit exists, but a part of it, which is called the jiva, is entrapped by illusion. This philosophy, however, is unacceptable because spirit cannot be divided like a fragment of matter. That part, or the jiva, is eternally a part. As long as the Supreme Spirit exists, his part and parcel also exist. As long as the sun exists, the molecules of the sun's rays also exist. The jiva particle is estimated in the Vedic literature to be 1/10,000th the size of the upper portion of the hair. It is therefore infinitesimal. The Supreme Spirit is infinite, but the living entity or the individual soul is infinitesimal, although it is not different in quality from the Supreme Spirit. The two words in this verse are to be particularly noted. One is nirantaram, which means non-different or of the same quality. The individual soul is also expressed here as animanam. Animanam means infinitesimal. The Supreme Spirit is all-pervading, but the very small spirit is the individual soul. Akhanditam means not exactly fragmented, but constitutionally always infinitesimal. No one can separate the molecular parts of the sunshine from the sun, but at the same time the molecular part of the sunshine is not as expansive as the sun itself. Similarly, the living entity, by his constitutional position, is qualitatively the same as the Supreme Spirit, but he is infinitesimal. You got that, right? It's clear. No? I'll read again. Maybe they're quite, how do you call it, mouthful? I mean, it's a lot there, but basically it's saying the soul is infinitesimal, but it has all the qualities. I mean, that's in simple language. The same qualities, but in a minute proportion, while the Supreme Spirit has in wholeness. It's whole. We are part of the whole, or the jiva. Does that make more sense? Same quality. That's what it's like. Same quality. Text 18. Well, there are quite a few verses here. They are part of the verses. How they call them? Once they're studied in Bhakti Vaibhava. Yeah. Or key verses, or maybe that's the one. I think I can't say now, but it sounds like Yana Vairena Yuktena Bhakti Yuktena Chatmana Paripashyat Udasina Prakritim Cha Hatau Jusham Hatau Jash sorry, Prakritim Cha Hatau Jasam. Yeah, it sounds like translation. will be the last verse for today. In that position of self-realization by practice of knowledge and renunciation in devotional service, one sees everything in the right perspective. He becomes indifferent to material existence, and the material influence acts less powerfully upon him. You know what I just said? Without looking. Okay, I'll read again, because it's in that position of self-realization by practice of knowledge and renunciation in devotional service. Jnana vairagya yuktena, one sees everything in the right perspective. He becomes indifferent to material existence, and the material influence acts less powerfully upon him. It's better now. Purport. As the contamination of the germs of a particular disease can influence a weaker person, similarly the influence of material nature or illusory energy can act on the weaker or conditioned soul, but not on the liberated soul. Self-realization is the position of the liberated state. One understands his constitutional position by knowledge and vairagya, renunciation. Without knowledge, one cannot have realization. The realization that one is the infinitesimal part and parcel of the Supreme Spirit makes him unattached to material conditional life. That is the beginning of devotional service. Unless one is liberated from material contamination, one cannot engage himself in the devotional service of the Lord. In this verse, therefore, it is stated, Jnana vairagya yuktena, when one is in full knowledge of one's constitutional position and is in the renounced order of life, detached from material attraction, then, by pure devotional service, bhakti yuktena, he can engage himself as a loving servant of the Lord. Paripashati means that he can see everything in its right perspective. Then the influence of material nature becomes almost nil. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Brahma Bhuta Prasanata, 1854. When one is self-realized, he becomes happy and free from the influence of material nature, and at that time he is freed from lamentation and hankering. The Lord states that position as Mat Bhaktim Labate Param, that same verse, 54. The real state of beginning devotional service. So it sounded weird. The Lord states that position as Mat Bhaktim Labate Param, the real state of beginning devotional service. Is the same there? Okay. It's like something. Okay. Similarly, it is confirmed in the Narada Pancharatra that when the senses are purified, they can then be engaged in devotional service of the Lord. One who is attached to material contamination cannot be a devotee. Uh-oh. Okay. So bad news at the end. But nothing to lament. We will read some more, so we'll get some more good news tomorrow. So please join me. It just happened that it's really dramatical now. So please come back. Come here or come at your screens, in front of your screens, and here earplugs, headphones. And join me tomorrow's reading 6:30. Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you.